In 1765, a private company, not a government, gained the legal right to collect taxes from 20 million people in Bengal, India. That same company had its own army of 260,000 soldiers. It controlled its own courts, it waged its own wars, and it printed its own money. The British East India Company wasn't just a business. It was a sovereign state disguised as a corporation. At its peak, it generated more revenue than the entire British government and controlled nearly half of global trade. Today, we call companies like Amazon and Apple powerful, but they've never conquered countries, minted currency, or ruled over a fifth of humanity. How did a trading company become more powerful than nations? And what happened when a corporation controlled the money supply? This is the story of the most dangerous company in history. Let's start at the beginning. It's December 31st, 1600. Queen Elizabeth signs a royal charter granting exclusive trading rights to a group of London merchants. The company is called the Governor and Company of Merchants of London, trading into the East Indies. We know it as the East India Company. The charter gives them a monopoly on all English trade between the Cape of Good Hope and the Straits of Magellan. Basically everything in Asia. In exchange, the crown gets a share of profits and access to exotic good spices, silk, tea. It seems like a standard trade arrangement. But there's a clause buried in that charter that will change everything. The company has the right to make war and peace with non-Christian powers. Read that again? A private corporation has been granted the legal authority to wage war. At first, the East India Company operates like a normal trading business. They establish small trading posts called factories in Indian coastal cities. They buy cotton, indigo, saltpeter, and tea. They ship goods back to England. Everyone profits. But India in the 1600s is not a unified country. It's a collection of kingdoms and princely states under the loose authority of the Mughal Empire, and the Mughals are beginning to weaken. The East India Company sees an opportunity. Why just trade when you can control the source? Here's where the story takes a dark turn. In 1757, Robert Clive, British East India Company officer, leads a private army against the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey. The company wins, not England. Company. And here's the critical detail. Clive's victory wasn't military genius, it was bribery. He paid off the Nawab's military commander, Mir Jafar, to betray his own ruler during battle. After the victory, Clive installs Mir Jafar as a puppet ruler. In exchange, the East India Company receives the Diwani, the right to collect all tax revenue in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. Let that sink in. A private corporation now has taxation authority over 20 million people. This isn't trade anymore. This is colonization by corporation. And then comes the money. In 1770, the East India Company begins issuing its own currency. It's a Sicca Rupee. These are silver coins stamped with the company's seal knot, the British crowns, the company's. They don't ask permission from Parliament. They don't need approval from the Bank of England. They just start printing money. Why? Right. Because controlling the currency means controlling everything. When you print the money, you decide how much soldiers get paid, what taxes are collected in, how debts are settled, who gets credit, and who doesn't. The East India Company now has the three pillars of sovereign power: military force, taxation authority, and monetary control. They've become a nation-state with shareholders. But here's where the model starts cracking. Corporations exist to maximize profit. Governments exist to maintain stability. When a corporation acts like a government, those incentives collide catastrophically. In 1770, a massive famine strikes Bengal. Crop failures, drought. Normal governments would open grain reserves, reduce taxes, provide relief. The East India Company does the opposite. They increase tax collection to maintain profit margins. They hoard rice to sell at inflated prices, continue exporting grain to England even as millions starve. The result? 10 million people die. one-third of Bengal's population. This is what happens when monetary policy serves shareholders instead of citizens. But the company's problems are just beginning, because printing your own money without backing creates an inevitable crisis. The East India Company floods India with Sicca rupees to pay for military expansion. More wars mean more currency issuance. More currency means inflation. Prices skyrocket. The rupee's value collapses. Indian merchants stop accepting company currency. They demand payment in silver bullion or other stable coins. The company's monetary system begins fracturing. And back in London, the East India Company faces a different crisis: debt. Running a private army of 260,000 soldiers is expensive. Administering territories is expensive. Suppressing rebellions is expensive. By 1773, the company is on the verge of bankruptcy despite controlling half of global trade. How do you go bankrupt when you can print your own money? Same way Spain went bankrupt despite owning all the gold. Having currency is not the same as having wealth. In 1773, the British Parliament passes the Regulating Act, the first attempt to control the East India Company. They appoint a governor-general to oversee operations. They try to impose accountability. It doesn't work. The company is too big, too complex, too corrupt. In 1784, Parliament passes Pitt's India Act, which transfers political control from the company to the British Crown while letting the company maintain commercial operations. Think about what this means. Corporation became so powerful that the government had to nationalize its political functions just to regain control. But the company still prints money until 1835, for another 50 years. Private corporate currency circulates through India alongside official government money. The monetary chaos this creates is staggering. Multiple currencies, unstable exchange rates, competing monetary authorities. It's an economic nightmare. Finally, after the Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British Crown dissolves the East India Company entirely in 1858. The company's monetary authority is transferred to the British Raj. It took 258 years to shut down the most powerful corporation in history. Now, here's where this story stops being history and starts being a warning. In 2019, Facebook announced Libra, private digital currency backed by a consortium of corporations. The plan was to create a global monetary system outside government control. Regulators killed it immediately. Why? Because they'd seen this movie before. When corporations control currency, they optimize for profit, not stability. The East India Company proved that in the most brutal way possible. But the pattern keeps repeating. Company script in American mining towns, 1800s, 1900s. Workers paid in private currency, only redeemable at company stores. Economic slavery, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, decentralized, but still private monetary systems outside government control. Volatile, speculative, unstable. Stable coins, USDC, Tether. Private companies issuing dollar-pegged digital currency, the same principle as the Sicca Rupee, just with blockchain. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Governments now rushing to create digital currencies specifically to prevent corporations from controlling monetary systems. The East India Company's legacy is this. We learned that monetary sovereignty cannot be privatized without catastrophic consequences. Currency is too powerful to be a profit center. So what should we actually learn from the East India Company's monetary experiment? First, printing money without productive backing always ends in crisis. The company issued currency based on military conquest, not economic output. Spain did the same with gold. Both collapsed. Money must represent real value, not just force. Second, when corporations gain sovereign powers, military taxation, monetary, they become ungovernable monsters. The East India Company started as a spice trader, and ended as a genocidal currency-printing war machine. Power without accountability corrupts absolutely. Third, monetary policy requires public accountability. The East India Company optimized currency issuance for shareholder profit. 10 million people starved as a result. Money is too important to be managed by private interests alone. The East India Company is proof that some powers should never be privatized. Here's the final uncomfortable truth. The East India Company never actually died. It was dissolved, yes, but the model survived. Today's tech giants controlled digital infrastructure the way the East India Company controlled trade routes. They set their own rules. They operate across borders, accumulate power that rivals governments, and some of them want to issue currency. We shut down the East India Company once. It took 258 years and millions of deaths to learn the lesson. The question is, have we actually learned it? If this video made you rethink corporate power and monetary control, hit subscribe. Next week, how the Federal Reserve was created in a secret meeting on Jekyll Island, and why the details still matter today. See you then.